Welcome to Oregon Voters Digest, the program that brings forward the social and political issues that are important to people living here in the Pacific Northwest. And now, your host, Bruce Broussard.
Welcome again to this segment of the Oregon Voters Digest. I'm Bruce Broussard, your host. By George, we've got all sorts of activities that are happening here within our country, within our nation, within the world. Okay, so we've got a show today. We're going to basically, as we said before, we're going to be focusing here in Swamp Alley. I hate to put it that way, but here in Oregon, here in the Portland metropolitan and county area, we're going to be talking about the issues that are relevant to all of us here. I mean, we're all trying to figure out what can we do? How do we find the needle in the haystack to solve the problems that we're having here? I mean, folks are trying to live. We got issues with the mental illness. We've got issues with law enforcement, and as far as that issue is concerned, the housing issues. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. But we got problems. I mean, it's so bad that my wife can't even go down to the local store and get milk or something of that nature. Whatever, she can't even shop. But naturally she can with me, naturally, with no problem. But the fact of the matter is, we've got some issues here. So we're going to continue talking to this peace aspect of it. But at the beginning of the show, what we're going to share a little thought about what's happening with us from a worldwide situation. This Ukrainian situation is really out there, and I know a lot of you don't even look at the news, but you need to start looking at the news because you need to know what's going down, because it's a very serious problem we're living in right now. And I'm just being very simple aspect of it. We've got the Russians who are basically in Ukraine, and they're sort of wiping these people out, and it's heavy. But the U.S. is right at the front of the line, talking to this whole issue, and the other nations are doing the same thing. But it's a tough situation over there right now. So pay attention. Look at the news. You know, basically, you can look at it at TV on the visual standpoint. You can do the newspaper, or you can be the radio. But really make sure that you check that situation out. Might add too that at the same time that it's my understanding that the U.S. is going to be looking at taking on 50,000 refugees here in this country. I think it was for 3 or 6 months. They mentioned something about some time aspect of it. They mentioned something along that particular line. And then you start thinking about here in the state. It's my understanding Governor Brown has already said that they're reaching out to refugees along that particular line. So you'll probably see more. And we got quite a population here. Here, even within Multnomah County in the city of Portland, as far as Ukrainians concerned, they were downtown Portland, and they were initially when this war started aspect of it, and they were basically doing that thing, the placards and things of that nature. But it's a very serious kind of a situation. So with that, I'm going to open up. I've got two of the people you probably recognized before, and we're going to continue to bring folks on, and naturally part of the deal now is that we want to know whether or not these folks. What are their positions on the whole issue with the Ukrainian piece? Very much so. I pretty well know what they're doing here locally, which is it's very, very upfront. And the reason being is that as I interview these individuals, and I'm opening it up to the door to other individuals, as long as they've got a resume. You've got to have something. If you're running for office, you've got to have some background that talks to the area that you're running for, or the position that you're running for. Is very, very serious, because we need leadership now. We definitely need leadership. And what I have with me before, I've got two guys here that are running. One is running for sheriff of Multnomah County, and that's Derek Peterson. You see him straight across. And then we got James Ball. James Ball with Metro Washington County, and he's here with us also too. They've been here before. And we're going to just continue to, as far as I'm concerned, they're going to just continue to be here. And I'm reaching out to anyone else that's running for office, or any one of these offices. Hey, all you have to do is reach out to me. I'm at 503-701-0457. You can call me anytime. But again, like I said, you can come on. I want to give you equal time aspect of it, but make sure you have a resume, because I will ask you the question. Trust me. And you understand that very well. You've got to know what you're running for, because that's what we're looking for now. This is not about the beauty and all that other good stuff. It's about seriousness. We need people that can deal with this issue. This is not OJT. This is not boot camp. It's not a boot camp kind of an environment. You got to know what you're talking about. So please give me a call. Again, 503-701-0457. And to hackers, please don't call me. Because I got things going. Please don't call me hackers. I do know that you vote, but the fact of the matter is, this is a very serious situation. We got to give these folks the opportunity. You need to understand who these folks are. The public needs to know who these folks are, and we don't need hackers. Okay? All right? With that, let me open it up. James, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Good, good. I see you guys on the campaign trail. How you doing there, Derek?
I'm doing fantastic,
Okay,
thanks.
so there he is. He's with the sheriff aspect of it. And maybe what we'll do is that because we're talking about Multnomah County, the county across the board aspect of it, we'll start up with you, James. I see you got your cover on. I take it you got some relatives that were basically in the military. You wouldn't necessarily serve yourself, but to a certain degree, you're dealing with a paramilitary outfit anyway. And that's sheriff department. You wear a uniform, don't you?
I wear one mostly every day.
Okay,
Yes, I do.
Well, you don't have one today. I understand you're knocking on them doors and visiting those camps, right? Those homeless camps. What were you doing activity-wise? Knocking on the doors?
Just out meeting the public and the people out there and letting them know that this is a race that's extremely important. It's the first race that's been contested in over 10 years, and it's a historic race. So I want to make sure that people know what's going on and that we have a great candidate in myself, Derek Peterson, for sheriff.
Okay.
Running in May 17th is the
Right,
date. So
right.
I need the votes.
Right, and now you'll be basically replacing Reese, right?
That's
Mike
correct.
Reese?
Yes.
Yeah, Mike Reese, and Mike did a good job. I mean, at one point in time, he was chief of police. He was chief of police of Portland chief of police aspect of it. And so he basically was very instrumental in making sure that now we're running for sheriff now. And he's going to just kind of take the retirement aspect of it. He did a good job of late when he was there in regards to the issue of law enforcement here, because as you note, this is a it's a state issue aspect of it, and he did sort of organize the state. He got the governor involved. He got the other municipalities. He got the sheriff involved aspect of it, and then he got Portland Police involved in the peace aspect of it. And really, that's the chain of command. Because in all due respect, the sheriff in Multnomah County basically identifies with all of the so-called law enforcement in all the municipalities. Am I right?
That's correct.
Okay, good. And Portland happens to be one of them.
That's right.
And plus the fact you guys are the jailers.
We are mandated to take care of the jails.
You take care.
We do a fantastic job of doing that. That's 70% of our operations. And,
right.
And so it's a big operation for us.
What are some of the locales that you guys have contracts with reference to law enforcement?
So we patrol out in the unincorporated areas, but we have contracts with Troutdale and Fairview.
Fairview?
Yeah.
Okay, good. And then from a jailer standpoint, you got Portland. Well, you don't have Portland, but because of the jailing aspect of it, they basically take all of the folks right up front, right?
Yeah. So Portland Police and the Gresham Police.
And the Gresham Police?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So they got their own in that situation.
Yeah.
Okay, good. You know, the other interesting thing about this piece is that when I thought about this piece, we've got the homeless aspect of it. We got folks out there on the street. We got folks that are committing crimes and things of that nature. But when any of those municipalities pick up the crime person, if it happens to be a homeless person aspect of it, in most cases when you think about the homelessness, unfortunately, but they look at the person, in all due respect, they haven't taken a bath or whatever, they don't have their shots, none of this, that, and the other. And in all due respect, you guys are picking them up. I mean, you have to take them in, right? You got me?
We take them in. That's for sure.
Tell us something. Spend a little time sharing with the public about what that process is. When they bring them up to your door, what happens to that person from that point to, let's say, to Z, so to speak? What happens to that person?
So if we're going to book someone in that has mental health issues or homeless, those kind of types of things, we're doing assessments right away. Once we get them into the door to make sure that they're safe. We make sure if they have some issues medically that they're being attended to, and we get them a hot shower.
You give them a hot shower?
Give them a hot shower and make sure that anything that's cleanliness-wise, that we can make sure that they're.
Now what about that clothing and stuff that belongs? You keep them from there?
So we have washers. We make sure that we wash.
Oh, so they're clean. You wash them.
Wash them before they get them. And a lot of times they disintegrate, so we go to some of the local stores and buy clothing, and specifically if they come in the wintertime or
Right.
the summertime, and
Right.
all of a sudden they've don't have they've actually gained some weight sometimes,
right,
that
right,
kind
right,
of deal.
right.
So we're able to give them some new clothing and send them on their way. So we're just making sure that they're taken care of before they leave out of our facility, and then we plug them into wraparound services wherever possible to make sure that they can get food or some shelter if need be. So that's what we end up doing in the sheriff's office.
Some of the other things, I'm familiar with James here too, because he's knocking on doors, and a lot of times these people are constantly asking him some questions about different things, and I'm just throwing some stuff. And James, join the deal with me. We're sort of interviewing him, so to speak.
Yeah, well, okay, I'll just go out right at you.
Go on, James.
So I'm curious. A lot of people kind of one of the narratives going on is that prison is not the place or the resource or whatever to address mental health or addiction issues. So you take someone who's maybe cutting catalytic converters off of vehicles. They've got mental health issues. They're addicted to some substances. Do you have the resources to help those people out, or kind of what's the process when you run into people who are just kind of really unable to interact with society?
Well, we do have major resources around that. We have our mental health team that comes along to make sure that they're being assessed, but we also have counselors there, and we are always looking to expand our counseling program to make sure that we're meeting the needs on all levels, whether it's socialization to education. We have pathways to get their certificate to work in a restaurant, if that so be. We have work crews where I tell you, our deputies are some of the finest, best people to bring some of the folks out to give them skill sets and just walk alongside them in a manner of speaking. So very impactful in certain ways. So a lot of people don't know what our deputies, especially in the jail aspect, are doing on a daily basis, and then our counselors and then our folks in mental health, trying to make sure that we're helping people out. But it's limited resources, and so that we're running up on that like everybody else.
Another point that I'm gonna throw out on the table is that when he first started talking about the whole issue that when they come in, they take the bath, if you will, and they take all that other stuff off. If it's salvageable, they put it in the washing machine. If it's not, they just discard it. Right? Am I right? Got me? And then I'm sure that they have uniforms. I think with the orange or something when they go out.
There are, if they're on the work crew or something like that, yeah.
You guys provide that.
Yes.
But you're talking about underwears and things of that nature.
Correct.
Okay, good. You just go on and get that squared away. What's so interesting about this is that unlike the city of Portland, I'm just using them because that's who people pretty well know, but any municipality for that matter, they will basically take the clothing and stuff that they have and put it aside and store it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the first thing that came to my mind was stored where, and is it rat infested around there? I'm just saying they shouldn't be wearing that kind of clothes anyway. Got me? And that was the other thing that I was concerned. But then at the same time, when thinking about a solution, just like you were saying, you guys were thinking about buying stuff for them. Well, we got one of the largest non-profit organization within our midst. It's called Goodwill. We got Goodwill. Yeah. They get it for free and then sell it.
That's exactly where we get a lot of our.
So do they give it to you for free?
A lot of times it's at a major discount or for free, for sure. So they help us out immensely in getting providing clothing.
So Goodwill, that was good. It's like giving them a voucher. Yeah. If they've got anything that might be worth something, guess what? Goodwill can make the assessment as to whether or not it is, and kind of give them a few dollars, if you will.
I think the argument is, what do you do with people's personal property when they get arrested or when they get moved on to a shelter? And what's the difference between personal property and garbage? I mean, that's a, I don't know where you draw that line. And if you talk to somebody on the street has severe mental illness, maybe they want all of their stuff, even if it really is useless.
But if you committed a crime, that's not right. You're going to go to jail. You got my point. And secondly, who's going to be handling that? Because in those garments and this, that, and because I used to work for USA Waste, It's now waste management aspect of it, but they got needles and they got all kinds of stuff, and people have to be handling that stuff. And you get stuck, and I can remember some of the staffers, had to go all of a sudden, they taking those shots and this, that, and the other. You know what I'm saying? So my point, I guess the point I'm making is that give it to someone that knows what they're doing, and Goodwill does, because when they take stuff in, they just don't take and start putting it on the rack. They go through the whole thing. I don't know how you bring it in, even if it's clean. They still check it up because they're selling it to the public.
Yeah.
And they don't want to have any problems. So here's an opportunity, if you will, that if that was set up with Goodwill, if you will, to basically take that stuff and look at it once it's kind of like before, to discard it one way or the other, and then give them a ticket, a ticket of value, if you will, or something of that nature, and they can put a value, and then they can basically go after they get out of this issue over here, and then with that voucher that tells they're being compensated, they can then buy the stuff that they want in there, so to replace it. But then just a thought. But my point is that I think that should be at the table, just like you were saying, just to talk about that, to see whether or not we can use something that's already in existence in our system. It's in our system. It's existing in our system. And a nonprofit means just that. It's nonprofit. See? So it's basically putting it back in, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the person is just not getting something, whatever. And then we can get rid of a lot of the, as one would say, the rodents and things of that nature that a lot of times are they being picked up in a camp. They can clean that up too at the same time. See
I mean, there's also, this is not a very popular program among a lot of Portlanders, I'm sure, but civil asset forfeiture is a thing that is in existence. Whereas if you're using material to commit a crime, that can be confiscated.
Yes,
so,
yes.
I don't know. You don't want to just be taking people's stuff, but it could be a way to, I don't know, just spitballing.
Good point. What about weapons? Yeah, what about weapons? Do you ever come up with weapons when you're frisking these people up? What do you do with those weapons?
Those weapons are taken and stored, and when they're going through that legal process, either it's going to be returned back to them, or it's actually destroyed at some point in time. So there's a whole process for illegal or even any kind of firearms that we take off folks,
right,
including knives. So we have a storehouse for that. We itemize it and make sure that it's tracked throughout that process, and then if it needs to go to a place where it needs to be destroyed, we'll do that.
And you guys check that out as to whether or not it was used in some other deal. You check all that. You just go through the whole process.
We'll go through the whole process, and so it's very important when we find a weapon of any sort that we make sure that we take care of it to the utmost degree and treat it with respect. But also, it's somebody else's property. And if it is their true property, we want to get that back to them, whether it's their clothing, whatever it might be. We need to respect people in our community, regardless of where they're coming from or what socio-economic background they're from or having some issues. We need to make sure that
Okay, James, you got another piece?
Well, I think that this needs to be the priority for all layers of government. I appreciate that that's a big priority for you guys, because I mean, whether it's city council, state, county, metro, we've got a human rights crisis here in the Portland metro area that is homelessness, and we need to treat it like a human rights crisis. We're kind of nibbling around the edges, spending a whole lot of money on a lot of things that don't work, and it's frustrating. And I think that Portlanders and people in the region are starting to realize that. People don't go downtown. If you don't live downtown, if you don't live there, and you have no reason to be downtown, it's people just aren't going because they're afraid for their safety. And it's not good for the people living on the streets. It's not good for the communities. It's not good for the business. It's not good for anybody. And so we, again, at all layers of government, that needs to be our number one priority in this region.
Exactly. The other thing I was going to ask you about that piece, when we see those folks going before the judge, for that matter, a lot of times I see those folks in suits and ties and things of that nature. Is that something that you guys provide for them?
So again, this is the jail aspect of it. A lot of people don't know, but we have a team of people that make sure that if they are going to go be adjudicated, especially specifically like a trial, that they have proper clothing, and their attorneys are able to work through a process of bringing those clothes in and we dress them out, and then when they're done,
Oh,
at
so
the
the
end of
attorney did. So that's part of that bill. Am I right? If you don't, in all due respect, if they don't have any money, they'll appoint an attorney.
Yes.
For the person, right? You got me? And I'm sure he puts that on his bill. You know, if the judge say, "Look, I want you to go get this man with a tie. He has to be appropriate and all that other good stuff." Somebody has to pay for it. That's what I'm saying.
That's correct.
You got me?
Yeah.
But again, here was another situation. They can go right down there to Goodwill again and check it out. Maybe tell the attorney, you know, hey, my point is that the system works, just to show that the system does work, aspect of it. And that's a good point. So now all of a sudden, now the person's got a suit. Now, whether or not he returns it back, but it's a pretty clean suit because he's just wearing it just for that particular occasion. Maybe he just give it back to the.
Well, it's
give it
officially
the
theirs at that point.
Oh, is it theirs then?
If the attorney works it out the way they should, so that they appear in front of the judge and the jury, representing themselves well, that's their suit.
That's the whole idea.
Yeah.
But you know, and it's something. I mean, it's really something. You know, you can do it. You can go down to Fred Meyer's and steal a couple of chickens, and you get your new suit. I didn't put it that way. I put it that way, but throw something on the table. Go on.
I got another question for you. So the Portland police have been getting in the news a lot the last couple of years for a lot of different reasons, and they seem to be just not enough officers for the caseload. Is that something that the sheriff could augment, or is that something you guys have worked with PPB on, or is that, am I just completely out of left field on this one?
No, they do that. They actually do that because that's what Reese was doing. Basically,
Oh,
Reese,
he is?
Yeah,
Okay.
and the state police knows this, that, and the other. But when he comes in this jurisdiction, the Multnomah County piece, they're all sitting around the table. And I agree with you from the standpoint of saying, why is there such a shortage? The way it's being laid out in the media, it's like Portland Police is the only one that's doing this stuff. With all due respect, and that's why I'm so glad that you're here and the kind of 35 years in that entity and knowing what that chain of command is, that flow aspect of it. I would have liked to have seen more uniforms, whether it be state police, whether it be Portland Police, Gresham Police, whatever, the whole jurisdiction, if you will, kind of like sitting out there trying to solve those problems across the board.
Yeah. Well, we're all short-staffed, and
Okay.
it's not just Portland Police.
But you guys work together. That's what I'm saying.
We definitely work together, but
Okay.
we're down 12, 15 people on our law enforcement side, 50 people, officers down on our correction side. So we're feeling the squeeze, and just like Gresham's having issues hiring people and retaining people. So that's one of my platforms, is to make sure that I look at our personnel and make sure that they're getting taken care of, and hopefully delay them from leaving the agency prematurely, and give us enough time to bring some people in the front door to help our situation out.
What do you think is the biggest barrier to, is it people that want to work for the police department? Is it people not, or the sheriff's office, people who don't qualify? Is it a funding issue? Like, what do you think is the biggest barrier to getting more officers out there?
Well, we've seen
All
the last
above?
3 years, right? The last 3 years have been very, very hard on our folks, our police officers, our sheriffs, our deputies, and they feel like they haven't been represented in a certain way, undervalued, those kind of things like that. So you have people who are just like tired and saying, it's time for me to retire or go somewhere else. And so there's not a lot of people who want to get in that business now after all the rhetoric, they hate the police and all the things that have been in the media. It is not a place where we're being able to attract people to come and work for us. So we're going to have to find different ways to do that, hire professionals to go out and across the country, look at our vets, people coming out of the military, and making sure we're on a first name basis, and just find different ways to attract people to our business and to our profession.
I'm a little hit you on this one for that matter. When you think about the system, in terms of what the major recruitment, because I was a recruit at one point in time, but bottom line, I too was part of that system because I was trying to recruit folks to get into the military. But in our educational system, in terms of, we used to have career days. Remember that? Career days. And law enforcement were there. and they'd speak up in this, that, and the other. That was the recruiting aspect of it. And they have auxiliary groups, if you will, that were built up as a result. So if a young person was there, they could join an auxiliary group. In fact, the Boy Scouts of America, if you will, Explorer Scouts. They'd have law enforcement, if you will, from the Explorer Scout standpoint. And so consequently, they're not doing that anymore. We're not doing that anymore. So the system is there. You know, this starts from at the beginning. We don't have a draft system anymore. You might be able to recruit some of the folks from the military today. Those are the guys that have already been, you know what I mean, they were in the military. But the new young person today is saying, bang, there's nowhere in the world I'm going to go out through that boot camp and see that sergeant. Because, you know, you're seeing it on visual aids and aspect of it. But that's a concern that I really have from the standpoint. We're not doing enough educating those young folks coming up in terms of, first off, defining what is law enforcement, what is public safety. What does that mean? It's not just a person sitting up in a uniform. What is a uniform?
Well,
Is
Bruce,
a deterrent.
you really drive home a point, and I will reflect still in this last 3 years where we've pulled police officers, our SOROs, out of our schools, and there's no real viable connection that police have with our students, with our youth. And when we talk about building community trust, I think that's a baseline, is having that trust or building those relationships with the youth again, and having a positive aspect of from their point of view of what a police officer is, and having those positive interactions, and they're just not happening. And as we start back up without police in those schools, and it has to be the right police officers, we can come to the table and say, should there be a uniform or not a weapon or whatever it might be, but pulling them right out and not having that relationship, those are our future leaders. Those are future police officers. And if we are not being able to engage them in a healthy way, policing is going to have a hard time in the future.
I think that you take it a step further is just community policing in general. I know we talked a little bit about this before we turned the cameras on, but having enough police officers to be able to build relationships with our communities, that's the step beyond the school resource officers. I think interactions with police officers will probably be a lot more positive if there's a relationship there, you know, and it's just my uneducated perspective, but when you cut the police budget and now every police officer is just running from crisis to crisis to crisis, you don't have time to build any of those relationships. All you're doing is taking care of whatever's right in front of you. And we've gotten away from, you know, the idea of a police officer who's walking the block and talking to people. And I don't know, I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you think that is a viable way to build some trust with the community and build relationships?
Absolutely, and when you have a shortage of people, this is what happens. But you know, I have to tell you, especially in the sheriff's office, and I would say that for Portland and even Gresham, they're willing to take extend their time out. They're more than willing to do that. It has to be everyone on deck. The public has to accept that to an extent. And what does that look like for our relationship building to that with our students, and actually allowing that to happen? And I was just at a fundraiser a couple of nights ago, and a lady was saying how with her students and even her kids, the positive relationships they had with our sheriff's office folks out in East County. And she'll never forget those relationships with the sheriffs that were in the schools. So we know we can have a positive effect, impact on our students, and we just need to be able to bring our community, bring our kids, parents, faculty into a situation where we say, what's going to be the best way for us to go forward?
Well, that community policing is good. That's a big issue, by the way. You know, and I guess what I was kind of like referring to in many ways, you got to start from square one. And that's that young person. When you start thinking, like I say, when in the school system aspect of it, they would visit the grade schools and this, that, and the other. They would hand out little paraphernalia, like little caps and this, that, and badges and whatever. And they take that home, you know. And then they play cops and robbers and things of that nature. But the whole idea is that an officer, when they were making that presentation, they had their uniform on, and they had their weapon. not quote not have that. They have to have that because that's an exposure aspect of it. They know what a police officer is, and then defining why he's wearing a weapon and this, that, and the other. You see what I'm saying? That's a very, very important piece. And then I think one of the mistakes that they've made, and I tried to talk with them about this, Portland Police at one point in time, they started, I told them, I'm a recruiter. I mean, no due respect, I'd apply for the job and pay me when you get results. But see, I had a uniform on at the time, and I said, you guys should think about, if you're getting in like the situation we're having now, don't wear it. You don't get a police officer to go out trying to recruit police officers. Get yet another entity, a recruiter, if you will, because right now they got that negative piece, and then get back into, let's have someone lobby the schools, get the superintendents together, if you will, and say, look, this is what we'd like to do. What do you think about it? Blah, 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 routine. Because a lot of times right now they would say, hell no, we don't want any military person coming in our school. I came in that way. When I came here as a Marine recruiter at Portland State, a gentleman, you know his name well, how about Judge Haggerty? You know him?
Yes, I do.
Well, Judge Haggerty was a recruiter, and I came in right after him, so to speak. And all of a sudden, there I was going to the schools now, and this, that, and the other. But I had a different approach, if you will. But saying he was good, he was very successful. But my point is that we had that uniform and we interacted. We had that uniform, but at the same time, but the police department was doing it in the schools, but then they stopped it. They stopped it. So I'm just throwing something out to you that maybe we ought to just have a discussion on it, just like we're doing it right now. I'm trying to get the new person, the new sergeant, so to speak, at the Portland Police Department to come on the table because he's the one that's carrying the initiative. But now with the Sheriff Department, that's another reason why we have you sitting here at the table aspect of it. There's not that much negative compared to what Portland Police have with reference to the sheriff. Because they relate to you for picking up the animals, picking up the animals and all this, that, and the other. People don't know about the Sheriff Department and what they do in many ways. So it's important that we do that. So in all due respect, they should use you guys more in terms of exposing and educating folks about public safety and this, that, and the other. So anyway, we've spent enough time at this point in time, but I'm going to have you guys back. I'm going to get some more things on you. But let's get to James here, and then you can be a part of the interview with James.
You get to return the favor.
I will return the favor. Yeah, James, good questions, though.
James at Metro, and that's kind of interesting. I remember when Metro started way back when, I was because here at Metro here, right there off of MLK, they were very much involved in it. I was kind of like part of it because I was in the garbage business stuff. I was working for USA Waste at the time, and so I was at Metro all the time. And so, but everybody know about the zoo and things of that. And they got that piece aspect there, but they got into transportation. They got a bunch of things. But what I'm going to do now, we're going to get James now, and we're going to ask him to define to the public just what is Metro? What are their responsibilities? They're getting a lot of our tax dollars. I want to know where my money's going.
Getting
anyway.
A lot of tax dollars. So, like you said, the scope keeps increasing, and that's one of the problems that I have with Metro, and one of the things that I'd like to at least slow down.
Okay.
So, Transportation and Housing Planning Commission is kind of the way I kind of describe it to people for the Tri-County area. So, for the people who are not interested or not as knowledgeable, Multnomah, Washington, Clackamas counties. So, Transportation and Housing Planning. And then they also do the zoo and the convention center and the expo center and a couple golf courses and waste disposal. That's a big thing. And in 2018, they added affordable housing. They passed a bond to build a bunch of affordable housing. And then in 2020 passed a tax for homelessness services. And so basically a transportation planning council is now getting $250 million a year to provide for homelessness services in the metro area, which I feel like is well outside their scope and where they're right. It's not their lane, and like I said, we all need to be focusing on homelessness. That needs to be the number one priority. But you've got a competency, a core competency, and city planners and transportation planners, that's their core competency. Homeless services, not so much. They're also doing this thing where they're buying farmland and renting farmland out to farmers and then collecting rents on those. And they're just doing all sorts of stuff outside the urban growth boundary. And I'm like, this has got to stop. This is our
big
tax
government,
dollars.
Big government.
Exactly. Leave those things city planners buying farms and managing
Yeah,
farms.
right.
Again,
That's
let
ridiculous,
the farmers
Yeah.
manage that land.
Yeah.
Let the state manage that land. Let people who that is their core competency
Yeah.
manage those things.
Okay.
So I one of the big things I'd like to stop that scope creep, scale it back. Let the other organizations, the other jurisdictions of government who are better at those things to manage them.
Well, let's jump on one of the areas, because we're going to be talking about all these other areas too. We're going to bring you back on because, again, the public needs to know.
Let's do
But
it.
one of the areas of concern, naturally, with the public is the whole issue with the garbage and the waste. Got me? And I know very much so that they're almost like the sheriff department, you guys, the jailers. But guess who basically, once the garbage is picked up, guess where they take? They take it to a landfill that Metro's involved.
Metro owns. Yeah.
See, they're responsible for the deal. So they really should be the chairperson of the board when you're talking about the whole issue of waste. Got me? And so on that particular line, let's talk about that, because they, again, from the waste standpoint, when I was there, because I was on that board for many times, but the whole idea is that they pretty well tell the person who's picking up the garbage what has to be in that waste to go to the landfill. So there's a whole process there. It gets picked up, it gets recycled, and then it goes to the landfill. I mean, they got the gas and all that. It's a very complex kind of a deal. But that's where the haulers are. You know what I'm saying? And then they tell the city and all these other entities, okay, this is what you happen to have, the garbage, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they have to go through a process. But it works that way. So let's talk about that in terms of how that garbage is being picked up. When you think about the waste that's on the street now with the whole issue of homelessness aspect of it, and we've all been looking at the tube, if you will, about monies being spent, and I think Channel 6 with Gianola or whatever, he's been going down there basically making the point, walking the deal and say, well, we went down here this week and got it picked up through the city, and then we went back the week after next, and it's back where it started from. Well, something's wrong with that picture. And we know for a fact that some people in the neighborhood will take advantage of that. They won't pay the bill and then just throw that garbage over there. You got me? See, what's happening with that?
I think there's a couple things. I think for one thing, if you solve the homelessness crisis and get people off the streets, a lot of that trash will take care of itself.
Right.
I think that the homeless population contributes a lot to that. I think that also there are housed people who see a pile of trash on the street and they'll start adding to it because why not? It's going to get picked up by someone else, not really my problem. But if you get rid of that camp, then you clean it up, and now there's really no pile of garbage to then add to. So I think a lot of that gets taken care of with the homelessness crisis. Again, Metro has $250 million a year to spend on homelessness. I was skeptical of that, but it passed, and so now.
Are you guys giving some of that money to the city? Where's the money going?
Yes,
for
I think
the garbage.
So I think it's kind of loosely worded, but I think
Loosely?
the plan, yeah,
Loosely?
the plan.
Oh, you're gonna solve that. You're gonna get that squared away.
The plan was to distribute it to the counties then distribute it to the cities distribute it to nonprofits. Everybody takes their cut. Everybody has their own little bureaucracy that spins the money around before they give it to the next one. And so what we need to do now as Metro, as leaders in this area, is to make sure that money is actually going to the right places, increase transparency. So make sure that it's going to the people who need it and not just eaten up by bureaucracy and everybody taking their little cut as they pass the money on to the next agency. So to your point about waste management, I think you help these homeless individuals get off the streets into a permanent situation, and I think a lot of that takes care of itself.
Okay. But what about, again, getting right back to the garbage aspect of it, do you have a standing committee where all the various parties, whether like where's the money going to, and where's the garbage going, that kind of stuff, are they having so is there a group that talks about these issues?
I'm not sure, but I think that transparency in that aspect is a
probably
really good.
You'll initiate that, right?
Right. You go back in history, and waste management is a industry that is very susceptible to corruption. I think the mob back in 100 years ago, there was trash collection in New York City that the mob was taking their cut of. They were fixing prices. It's one of those things that they don't really produce a product, and so I mean, you watch Breaking Bad? They're doing the car wash thing. Like those type of things where you provide a service where there's no end product, it's real easy. There's very ripe for corruption. And I'm not saying that there's corruption going on, but I also don't know that because there's not a whole lot of transparency along what those contracts are and who's getting what and where the trash is going.
I'm glad you brought that up, my friend, because I was in there. You know, I'll be right up front with it. We've got quite a system here. Got me? The haulers are all involved in the process. Trust me. And the landfill entities are all involved in the process. And we were having, I was on that board. And we were having discussion, you know, making sure that the right things were being thrown into the pit, if you will, making sure, you know, we create, was it propane or whatever, they get the gases and whatever, methane or whatever, they use that piece, and they're constantly doing the R&D, you know, researching whatever, they're doing that stuff and just checking, seeing what else they can do with garbage, what not to throw, and then they're taking a lot of stuff out of garbage aspect of it. And I'm just throwing this out to you that this is something that you might be able to follow up on because it's important. You know what I mean? And that committee discussed that. So by the time here we are talking about that pot of money and sending money to them, this, that. Wait a minute, we're not going to send that money. We're going to do something like this. And I'll throw something else out to you guys in regards to that. When I was working for USA Waste aspect of, I just happened to have been sitting as chair of Inverness Jail. I was sitting on a committee, and I was chair over there, and naturally people were responsible for the whole aspect of it, of those folks that are there, trying to help them out, et cetera. So we had meetings and whatever. And so recycling was a very major issue. And so naturally, because I was working for USA Waste aspect of it, and working for the committees and this, that, and the other, we came up with an idea. USA Waste had a large recycling plant sitting right off of Lombard. Okay, and we were basically trying to figure. So since I was sitting here trying to get these folks to get jobs and things of that nature, recycling was big money. And so we worked out a deal. Where Inverness, Mike, I still remember him big time. So what he did was that he put together a system such that he took a lot of the inmates. Got me? They were given a lunch bag. They would take them over to the recycling plant. And show them how to recycle on the lines, and then take them back and pay them. Heck of a deal, okay? And then all of a sudden it competed with some of the other folks who didn't want to recycle. That's the way I look at it. And then as a result of that, they were saying, well, some of the inmates were taking a whole bunch of checks. You know, people throw all kinds of stuff in the deal, and they were taking it and doing other things with some of the stuff that was there. And so they didn't follow up with, then after I wasn't on the board anymore. But all of a sudden they didn't follow up with the project. That was a beautiful piece because that's big money. And then I was even talking to labor with the trades because you got different kinds of trades, and labor tends to identify with all kinds of entities aspect of it. And so I was just in the process of working a deal out with labor to classify that piece as a labor piece. And then we've been able to get into the union aspect of it and make them some money. You know what I mean? It's a structured deal. And then a lot of these folks who are coming out, some of them have background in carpentry and this, that, and the other, but the labor is the key, the labor group is the key to all of the various trades. And so this where a person has the option to go here, this, that, and the other. So it was a kind of a system, but it was fun sitting around the table, and that's how these ideas were coming up. So my point is, again, right back, the system works. The system works. See, and we're not taking advantage of that piece. And as a result, today it's kind of like the public, the paying public, don't know what's going on. We're dependent upon the leaders who we elect to office, folks like you guys. And that's why I'm making that point to the folks who are running for office. This is not show and tell routine. This is a very serious situation. We're looking for leaders, people that can sit at the table and iron out some of these. These are temporary jobs, as you know. As far as what you guys are doing, you're going to be sitting. This is not long term. We want term limit anyway.
Well, Metro in general, just the whole organization, is such a underappreciated entity. You know, the homelessness, the police. You know, you're front and center, and a lot of the stuff you're dealing with is what people see on a daily basis. But you look at waste services. Another thing we were talking about before we turned on the cameras is the Rose Quarter expansion of I-5.
Yeah.
This is a transportation policy, land use, waste management. These are all things that impact people on a daily basis, but they're not so front and center that anybody really thinks about them until it's hitting you in the face. And so it's really important to pay attention to these primary races, because and this is something you said earlier. Every nonpartisan position in the state, I believe, has their election on May 17th. And so that is county commission, that is city council, that is sheriffs, that's metro, that's any nonpartisan position. So you tend to have lower turnout. People don't pay as close of attention to these races, but they are very important. And the traffic, the homelessness, the affordable housing, the fact that housing in the region has gone through the roof, these are all things that Metro has been, over the last 40 years, building. They've been building these issues by either ignoring them or, in the case of traffic, encouraging the problem to persist because they have other ideas about what we should be doing as far as transit and how people need to get where they're going. But these elections are important, and I think that people really need to pay attention to this May election, every May election, but this one in particular, because we're on it.
Well, it's good that you're sitting here, and it's good that you and Derek are sitting here, and you see where I'm coming from. I don't think you can find another venue like what we're talking about here. I mean, because in all due respect, and I know the media it plays a major role in selecting leaders aspect of it, and when you think about that, and I used to be in that business to a certain degree, and a lot of times the person who's doing the interviewing, they have no idea of what you do. And so consequently, they do generic kind of questioning aspect of it, like what's the price of milk? Well, what does that have to do with the price of what? You know what I'm saying? Now, don't get me wrong, but my point is that they don't get to the crux of the matter. And so I think we have an opportunity now, because of what's happening within our environment. They've said specifically what some of the issues are. We talked about the homeless piece aspect of it, the mental health. I mean, the visual things that people see. I can't go downtown because of this. I can't leave my house because someone's going to burglarize it. I can't. Some cases I can't even drive my car. I can't. The wife drive my car because if she drives at night, somebody might just boom stop her and take the car out or do things in that cars and catalytic converters. I mean, it just goes on and on and on. And so we're lucky at this point. Well, I say lucky, but we got something on the table now. And so anybody running for office should be talking about that. And I would say to them point blank, to all those folks who are running for office, when you start getting interviewed by the medias, and we got media, that's their job, but they're selling commercials. We're trying to sell issues of solving these issues aspect of it. So if you're going to be interviewing with media, if they go down that lane, just tell them point blank, look, I want to talk about the issues. Just tell them point blank, look, I'm not interested in your price of milk and this, that, and the other. I'm talking about homelessness. I've got a solution to the problem that I think. And then share your idea of what you feel are the solutions. Not something that's generic, just specifically, because that's why you're running.
Yeah, so what's your top 2 or 3 initiatives as you, because Metro is huge. It's a huge, and I think it's important that people really understand the components of that, because they don't know what Metro does really. At the end of the day, it's cloaked. It just says Metro, and there's everything else underneath.
Well, I think number one needs to be working on the homelessness crisis. Like I said, I was skeptical of that bill when it passed, but now that it's passed, now we have to make sure that money's going to the right place.
Let them hit that homeless deal.
So
and garbage. What we just got through talking about.
Right. So, I mean, the city of Portland spent over $100 million last year on homelessness services, and the number of homeless point in time estimate went from around 4,000 to around 4,000. $100 million to maintain the status quo, which is insane. I mean,
what did they do with that money?
That's a good question, Bruce. That's a good question.
See, that's the other thing about guys like you that I've run to before. But the idea is there's this reluctance about the people that are already sitting there to have a little orientation of these questions, or if not that, share it to the public at whole, and then let the public look at it and then say, okay, fine, I think I can do something about that. then they can run. But right now, it's just a matter of, if you got enough guts, if you will, to say, well, I want to run for office. Well, that's not what we should be looking at. We need leadership. We need people that can talk to solutions. That's what we're looking for.
Yeah.
Fair?
Well, yeah. Well, so that the plan that I would have been kicking around that I would really like to see is a large homeless shelter with wraparound services all in one place.
Okay.
And the idea that I would like to see is the Expo Center, which is already a Metro property. You have people that are already using it, but you can reschedule them to the convention center or a different venue. And then when I was in Afghanistan, I lived in a 10 by 10 box with a cot and a wall locker. You can fit a lot of people in there, give them a little bit of privacy, and it's a temporary shelter just to get people off the streets, make sure there's food, make sure there's hygiene, and make sure there's access to mental health care, to addiction specialists, to job training, to all of those different things that right now are spread throughout the city. You put them all in one place, and you say, all right, here's your place to sleep, here's your place to eat, here's your place to shower, here's your place to go get all of your issues taken care of. And then once you're at a point where you can, where you're able to take care of yourself and kind of contribute to society, you transition back into society. And whether that's affordable housing or free housing or a permanent shelter or whatever would kind of depend on the individual, because homelessness at its core is an individual problem. It's not, you can't just throw people in a home and expect that, or a hotel room or a shelter, and expect them to just fix themselves. A lot of these people have a lot of issues that prevent them from really contributing, and those issues need to be addressed before they can really kind of reintegrate and transition back into society.
Throw something out to you.
So you make it easy. You make it easy for them. You put them all in one place so they don't have to go anywhere, and you can kind of monitor them and help them through that process.
Right, but as you know, now it's just people just throwing money at it.
Yeah, well, kind of the philosophy that we're going on now is that homelessness is caused by lack of housing, and so that if we just build enough housing and give it to people, that will solve the homelessness crisis. But A, that's really, really expensive. B, it's ignoring all of the mental health and other issues that are keeping people off the street, substance abuse.
See, and to me,
it takes a really long time.
See, it's not a homeless problem; it's a sheltering problem.
Yeah. So you provide shelter.
Because when you provide shelter.
You provide shelter and a process.
That's the future. That's what we're trying to get to that point where you own your home, if you will.
Provide shelter and a process. And once you get through the process.
So what I'm throwing out to you, just as something that maybe you think about, is I think we need to go back to square one before we came out with the big H, and say, when did it all start? When did we came up with this idea about homelessness? Start at that point, and then look at the leaders that were around that basically took it and ran with it with no solutions. Yeah. So if you just put together a committee, make it public, make it as public, get the Coliseum, whatever, and just have a big meeting, but make sure you call all the folks that started this stuff way back when. And I'll give you a good example of that, a good place to start. I'm throwing it out to you, United Way. You call up the director of United Way because you're running for office. You go down there to United Way and just say, look, my name is so-and-so and so-and-so. What do you people do? When did you get involved in homelessness? I know they did that. I used to work there. And they had an entity that basically talked to all the issues, livability issues. And then once they identify this is a problem, they can come up with a solution. And then they give it to the fundraiser because you need X number of dollars to implement this. And then they announce it to various services out there, or if not that, like a new creation of a job routine, and try to make it attractive. Otherwise, they do it themselves.
Well, another good example is the former Wapato facility, now Bybee Lakes Hope Center.
Oh yeah, that's big. You better hold on that. That's a huge one.
Well, I think that's a great model because that's what they do. That's what they do. They pull people in. So it's a little bit different because I don't know that they do a whole lot with mental health. It's a high barrier shelter, so you need to be clean and sober, and they'll kick you out if you're not there. But they're helping hundreds of people.
Yeah, that's political. No, we'll
This is a political show. We're going to talk about politics.
Well, no, I like it.
I think that's.
We only have about 4 minutes. That's
all right. Okay.
That's what I'm saying.
You wrap
once
up
you get in there, because in all due respect, I'll put it this way. In fact, the three of us, maybe we might just go down there and just visit the facility.
Yeah. Well, let me just make
Love
one more
to.
point before we
Yeah.
end. This is a facility and a program that has been proven to work over the last couple of years, and they are receiving exactly $0 in public money. It is privately funded because nobody will touch it, because everybody points to it as a failure, because I have no idea why, but they don't get city, they don't get county, they don't get metro money, they don't get state money. No public money is going to Bobby Lakes Hope Center, which I think is awful. You know, this system that works, that is getting people off the street. It's not going to work for everyone. Like I said, they require to be clean and sober, which for a lot of people is a bar too high. But
But I tell you what I do. I'm gonna challenge you.
No money.
You know why? Because I ran. That was my platform when I ran for District Number 2.
yeah, what was that?
I know the whole story.
To
I
give
know
them
why,
money, or to
They had the money.
yeah.
In fact, if anything, the county should never have sold that building. We needed the beds.
Yeah.
Okay. But we'll go from there. In
All
fact,
right.
the best way to do it, give the respect, go back to square one.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm going to do, I'm going to throw it out to you guys, both of you. Why don't we just go and visit the facility, and sit down there and visit with the director and just look at the facility.
I'm very
look at the
familiar
ground.
with the facility.
I am too.
I visited their facility in
But
Astoria
you
a couple
understand,
years
but
ago.
now we got another mission, right?
Yeah, right.
We're talking about solving the problem. It's not being anti or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we need to start there, because that was square one. See, okay? And so from a historical standpoint, we go way back when, who basically started the whole piece. You got me? There's a lot of history there, but we can do that. We got about another 2.5 minutes, almost 3 minutes aspect of it. So why don't we just kind of maybe conclude by saying, give each one of you about a minute or so just to talk about what you're planning on doing and anything on your mind, and what are you feeling out there on the street when you're knocking on those doors and doing your fundraising? Are they still focused on those issues that we've been talking that's out there?
Yeah, it is the main issues of today, and rightfully so, with citizens that are just afraid to go outside their own homes just to take a walk, to be out there with their kids, take a bike ride. That is unacceptable, and leadership has to step up. And if we need to bring in new leadership that is going to make some hard decisions that need to happen, we need to do that. And you can't work in silos anymore, cross county and city lines. Everyone has to come on deck here to solve this issue. It's not just a one entity issue, it is a community issue.
Okay.
And so I'm just excited to be able to work with folks. To do
Good.
that.
Sounds good. James, what do you
great.
think? What's on your mind?
Yeah, I think the number one thing that people care about is homelessness. Like I said, Metro's got a lot of scope and a lot of different things they've got their fingers in, but a lot of it's not front and center. And so, but people care about homelessness, and they care about getting people off the streets and helping them, not just putting them in a warehouse to rot, but actually like getting them the services they need to transition back into society. So that's my first, second, and third thing that I'm looking at. I've got 4, 5, and 6 also,
Yeah.
but that's the number one thing, is making sure that the homeless are taken care of, and that's what I hope to do.
Well, in fact, let me ask you that question before we get there. How about opponents? How many people are running in for District 4?
There's 2 of us.
Just
So
2 of you guys?
me, and then the incumbent, who is
incumbent.
is the status quo. You know, if you think the status quo is good enough, go ahead and vote for him.
Yeah.
But if you
We
want
don't
things
know-
to
we
change,
don't know the status quo now. Status quo. You got my word. Come on down, give me a call. I have to give you an opportunity to. You can either just yourself, you can introduce yourself, but at the same time, maybe we might even get a situation where both you and James could be there talking about this piece, because we want to get to the issues. And I'm just a neutral party. That's all. Very neutral. Same thing, Pat. Same thing. You, Derek, right?
I'm going to start doing that. I'll just refer to him as status quo.
Yeah,
That's
there
it.
you go. There you go. There you go. How about Derek? How many people have signed up so far?
We have 2.
You have 2
so far.
Just the 2 of you guys?
Yeah. Well, 2 others. So 3
2 others?
3 total.
3 total?
Yeah,
Okay.
yes.
Now you have to have been a law enforcement officer in order to be able to run for that office?
No, you don't have to have the credential of law enforcement. Just that you are, what do you call it?
What you have to be?
Well, you just have to be commissioned. I was down in corrections.
Okay.
And so, yeah.
That's a good note. We'll talk about that.
Yeah.
Folks, thank you very much for being with us. We'll see you next week. Have a good one.